Hello everybody, welcome back. The next prop you see me getting started on is just going to be a static prop. What I want to do is I want to build a Grim Reaper sitting on top of like an old weathered mossy covered block. Just kind of sitting there staring at you, kind of pondering, that kind of thing. I'm thinking about going with a lot of darker colors for this one to kind of give it like that dark sinister kind of look, but things might change based on how I feel colors are meshing with each other and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and continue with it and we'll see how this one turns out. I'm starting off by making this base 27 by 21 by 16. I'm doing that because it's going to give me nice even numbers for my foam board to maximize out the usage. Next, I'm going to be drilling a 3/4 inch hole through the top 2x4 and halfway through the bottom 2x4 and installing this piece of 1/2 inch electrical conduit. This piece of electrical conduit is going to act as the main back support, holding the skeleton in the upright position. This part can be a little time consuming. It's a lot of back and forth to the bender, but you want to make sure you get it as tight as possible to the backbone so it looks the best. Now this is where you're going to see where I maximize out this piece of foam board. 2 of the pieces will be cut to 27, the other 2 pieces will be cut to 21 and then 16 inches tall, and that's going to fit around that base perfectly. Next step is to take the foam gun and start gluing all the foam to my base. Now to kind of hold the joints together while everything dries, I'm just going to use some masking tape to lock everything in place, just so I don't make any unnecessary holes. One of the nice things about using the foam gun is the foam that comes out of that actually sets up in about 20 minutes. And by setting up so much faster, it actually reduces the wait time versus using the cans. I decided to hold off on that 4th piece until I got my top made, just in case I needed to make a modification. It also makes it easier for me to mark that hole for where that tube needs to go through. Alright, so with everything made and everything being marked, I'm going to go ahead and get the last 2 pieces glued into place, and then once those are dry, I can start moving on to the skeleton. Alright, with the base pretty much done, it's time to start putting the skeleton in position. So I went ahead and just zip tied it to the metal pipe in the back, and I'm going to start positioning all the legs and arms. Now for me to get the legs to bend in the way I want them to, because with this plastic they don't flex that much, I just went ahead and cut them, stuck a piece of wood dowel inside there. That's going to give me the ability to kind of twist that femur to get the angle that I need it to be. Now I'm going to be having them in an Indian style seated position, so I'm using that pink foam to hold the legs in a semi-upright position that you normally would see when someone's sitting in that position. And then hopefully when I do all my draping and all that stuff, it's going to hide all that so you won't see it in the end result. To lock everything in that position, I'm going to go ahead and use some expansion foam to glue the foam to the base and the leg to that foam. Here I'm just taking some 1-inch strips, ran them through the table saw, put a small bevel on them. I'm just going to put them on the lower half to create like a lower border piece. And on the top, I'm going to be using a 1/2 inch strip to create a transition from the lid to the base. It'll be a little harder to use the masking tape to hold all these little pieces on, so I'm just using toothpicks to hold everything in place until the foam dries. Okay, so I made a quick change real quick to the leg area. I was kind of worried I wasn't really going to be able to hide that wedge piece really good, because I am going to have a pair of pants on them, and unless I were to cut the pants in just a certain way where they kind of drape around it or something like that, I had a feeling it's going to be really hard to hide that. And he is going to be wearing a bit of like a trench coat kind of thing, but unless I get it to fold on both sides really good to really hide it, I have a feeling it's going to be hard to hide it. It's not going to look really good. So I took this piece of electrical conduit, bent it into the shape, ran screws through both pieces right here to lock it in place, and I put an L bracket on here and welded it in place. So this way, it kind of supports itself. And then I just bored a hole through the bone, so I'll go like this. So this way I can still rotate this the way I need it. And what my plan is once I get the pants on, I'll have the pants come all the way to the back. Then I'll slide the skeleton down inside the pants so it looks like he's actually wearing the pants. And then when I get the legs to where I'm ready to do fix them in position, I'll go ahead and roll the pants all the way up so I can blow some expansion foam inside here. So when it dries, it'll lock everything in position so it doesn't move. And then after that, then I'll just bring the pants back to where they need to be. So at this point, I'm ready to start covering this base right here with some concrete mix. So let's go ahead and work on that next. So for the mix, all I'm really using is just latex house paint and some concrete mortar mix. I didn't add any kind of like joint compound to it because I'm not really making a monster mud for this particular portion. It's pretty much just spreading a concrete mix, but using the latex house paint helps it bond and stick to the styrofoam better than if you mixed it with just a straight water. Now right here, I'm just putting a second coat of that gray latex house paint over top of it now that it's dry. What this is going to do is this just kind of helps seal everything and lock everything in place. Now right here, I'm just doing some pre-fittings and pre-cutting, making sure everything's going to fit like I want it to before I start adding any paint to it. So this way, once I get it all covered in saturated paint, I'm not trying to make any kind of modifications or cuts after the fact. Now that I got the pants in place, I'm going to go ahead and put the skeleton in position. Putting the skeleton in after the fact at this point kind of makes it look like the skeleton is actually wearing the pants because I dropped the skeleton down inside the pants after I kind of curled them up. Alright, so right here, this is where I'm going to pull the pants back. I'm going to dry the piping off a little bit with some paper towels. And this is where I'm going to put the expansion foam down inside the bones and then pull the pants back over. So this way, once everything dries between the paint and the expansion foam, everything will be locked in position. Alright, so with the pants being on, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the top. You can see a piece of cardboard I have glued to his head. What that's going to be for is that's going to make sure that when I do the part that drapes over top of his head, it's going to dry in a nice rounded shape instead of it kind of folding weird. It's just going to make it look good in the end result. Alright, now that all the draping's on, now it's just a matter of just waiting for it to dry. I did make one big mistake. I should have put a plastic down over top of that base before doing all the draping. That way I could paint the two pieces separately, and you'll see why that's a problem in just a minute. Now, since the plan is for this to look like a Reaper sitting on top of a block, I'm not making him look like a statue, so I'm giving him a more realistic look, so I'm doing his draping all in black. That's also why there was no monster mud mix for this, and there's just straight paint. And here's why I should have made it to where I can remove him off the base, because now that I painted him, I got to do a bunch of touch-up painting around the base. Now for the skeleton, I still want him to be a darker color, but I also want him to be able to stand out a little bit, so I'm going to use a darker gray on him. So you can see right here where I'm adding the slightly darker gray, you can see where he's starting to stand out a little bit more versus if I left it all black. So what I'm doing right here is I'm taking some lighter gray paint, and what I'm doing is I'm doing some dry brushing over top of like the hands, the feet, the rib cage, and things of that nature. So this way I can kind of create like highlights, have some areas lighter, some areas darker, just to make certain sections stand out, especially like in the knuckle areas of the hands. Alright, so he's pretty much about done. You can see where the dark gray and then the light gray dry brushing definitely helps him stand out against all the black. For the base, I'm using a mixture of black and dark green together to kind of generate this dirty, mossy color. To apply this paint, I'm using a sponge so I can get it heavier in some areas, lighter in some areas, and I'm using a spray bottle to where I can do kind of the same thing. I can spray it heavier in some areas and lighter in some areas to kind of give a natural runoff, kind of generating 100 years worth of dirt in just a few minutes. Alright, so I'm at this point right now. The base definitely came out much darker than I was expecting it to. As I was using the paint and the water, and as I was applying it and I was doing the wash off, it kept looking a little too light, so add a little bit more, then add a little more, that kind of thing. And when I got to my stopping point while it was still wet, it actually looked really good. But once it dried, it definitely dried darker than I was anticipating. So I added that black that you see right there, and that kind of gave the appearance it's actually a little bit lighter than it realistically is. But now I was originally planning on going for a darker look to begin with, so I definitely achieved that for sure. I'm still pretty happy with it, but it's a little bit darker than what I was originally going for. Alright, so I was just applying the moss that I wanted to put on there. Now, I never really added moss to any of my props before, so I kind of went online and just kind of looked up some pictures to try to get an idea of probably like the best places to kind of apply it to kind of give like the best look, I guess you could say. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I don't think it looks too bad. The next thing is I'm thinking about changing the color of that skeleton, and the reason why is I just don't feel that he really stands out enough. Like, you know, amongst all the darker colors, he just doesn't really pop. So I'm going to think about that a little bit, and we'll just see what happens. Okay, so I made my decision. I'm going to go ahead and lighten him up. That darker color just really wasn't working for this particular prop. So I started off by just using a white paint, let that dry, and now what I'm doing is I'm slowly applying a dark walnut stain to it. To try to make it look as best as possible, what I'm doing is I'm slowly adding the layers one by one. So I put the first coat on, I let it fully dry. Now I'm coming back and just doing some highlight areas. I'm making some sections darker, leaving some sections lighter, just to try to give it a little bit more contrast and just try to give it a little bit more of a realistic look. That is much better. I think I'm done with this particular one. So I'm going to go ahead and take it out in the yard and finish this video up. Alright, so here we are. It's all done, ready to go. Overall, this wasn't too bad of a project to do. A few little hiccups along the way, especially with the repainting of the skeleton, but I definitely am much happier with it now. I do think the overall end result of this prop definitely is much better. Overall, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.